All right, Psalm 106, I would like us to read 34 to 43 as the psalmist gives us kind of an overview or a snapshot of what's happening during the time we're studying back in 2 Kings. So Psalm 106, 34 to 43. Carter?
They did not destroy the peoples concerning whom the Lord had commanded them, but they mingled with the Gentiles and learned their works. They served their idols, which became a snare to them. They even sacrificed their sons and daughters to demons, and shed innocent blood, the blood of their sons and daughters, whom they sacrificed to idols of Canaan, and the land was polluted with blood. Thus they were defiled by their own works, and plagued the harlot by their own deeds. Therefore the wrath of the Lord was kindled against his people, so that he abhorred his own inheritance. And he gave them into the hand of the Gentiles, and those who hated them ruled over them. Their enemies also oppressed them, and they were brought into subjection under their hand. Many times he delivered them, but they rebelled in their counsel, and were brought low for their iniquity.
Okay, so this backs us up, of course, to the time when they go into the land. They were told to get rid of the idolatry in the land, get rid of the people in the land, but they failed to fulfill God's command in that regard and ended up being influenced by the people in adopting their ways. And as they did that, of course, over time, they degraded in their characters, their morals as a nation, and it got to the point where God said no more, and thus he decided to carry them off into captivity to allow that to happen. And we're looking at this northern kingdom now, of course, and the time after Jehu. Jehu, as we discussed before, he failed to restore the religion of Jehovah. He got rid of the Baalism, at least for a time during his rule and reign. And it tells us in 2 Kings chapter 10, verse 31, he took no heed to walk in the law of the Lord God of Israel with all his heart. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, who had made Israel sin. So that failure, of course, just kept the groundwork there, I guess you'd say, the fertile ground for idolatry to come back with a vengeance over time. And so we understand that the people continued to degrade, to go away. Let's read 2 Kings 10, 32 and 33 and see one of the consequences of this. So 2 Kings 10, 32, 33, who's got those two? Go ahead, Jim.
In those days, the Lord began to cut off parts of Israel, and Hazael conquered them all in all the territory of Israel. From the Jordan eastward, all the land of Gilead, Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh, from Arori, which is by the river Arnon, including Gilead and Bashan. Now the rest of the acts of Jehu, and all that he did, and all his might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel?
Okay, so talking about these parts of Israel being cut off, and you notice there as you read through that, Gad, Reuben, Manasseh, where would that be when they're grouped together, Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh? Does that trigger anything, Philip?
East of the Jordan.
Okay, east of the Jordan. So remember that to the northeast of Israel here, this northern kingdom, is the region of Syria. And it's talking about this Hazael coming down and sweeping through and taking this territory. So while Jehu went through the land and purged out the Baalism because his continued sins there, they're weak. And Hazael's able to advance and to take territory at this point. In fact, he reaches down into the area of Moab, even with that Aurora in that area, Gilead, Bashan, and so on. So it's all on the eastern side of the Jordan. And it's hurting the kingdom, of course. So Assyria at this time is a growing menace, and we're going to get to this time of Jeroboam. So you can see Jehu there He reigned for a pretty good long time. He's in that yellow spot in that northern timeline. And there's a couple kings that follow after him. And you get down to this Jeroboam, or as we better know him, Jeroboam the second. And he had a time of prosperity, of strength under his rule and reign. But it's during this time that Assyria is growing as a regional power and ends up, of course, becoming an empire. Now, Israel is under threat. Syria ends up under threat. We'll talk more about those two and their alliance in a little bit. But remember, when you look at the map here, why is Assyria, why do you think they're pushing down through Syria, Israel? They're going to sweep through Judah. So if they're going from north to south, where are they headed? Philip?
Aiming at Egypt.
Egypt. Why Egypt?
Because it's another power.
Okay, it's another power. Yeah, it could be a potential threat or rival. Any other thoughts there? One, what goes through this region, what goes through Israel, what goes through both to the west and also to the east of the Jordan there, but it's a very narrow area in here because the Arabian desert is off to the east. But these are trade routes that come through here. So trade going into Africa, coming up out of Africa, there's a lot of it that travels through here. So there's an aspect of that. But then Egypt is an extremely wealthy empire, and there are riches to be had there. So Assyria wants to get down there and get that. Of course, it's the breadbasket in that Nile Delta, lots of food resources, grain resources. In fact, later in history, of course, it becomes pretty well the breadbasket for the Roman Empire. So that's why they want to control that. But they're pushing through. It's not that they're trying to get Israel. They want to control that territory to get to Egypt and some of those other things. So we get to this Jeroboam the second here. Jeroboam the second helped restore some territory. Let's go to 2 Kings chapter 14. 2 Kings 14, and let's read 25 to 27. 2 Kings 14, 25 through 27 as it's talking about this Jeroboam. Who's got that for us? Go ahead, Clint.
He restored the border of Israel from Lebo-Hamath as far as the sea of the Arabah, according to the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, which he spoke by his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet who was from Gath-Hepher. For the Lord saw that the affliction of Israel was very bitter, for there was none left, bond or free, and there was none to help Israel. But the Lord had not said that he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven. So he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, the son of Joash.
Okay. So again, Jeroboam is a relatively strong ruler in Israel. And it was a time of prosperity. The verses up on the chart there I can see are wrong. It should be like 24 to 27, 25 to 27, what we just read. Verse 24 had mentioned, of course, that he was an evil ruler. It's not like he was a good guy, but he was able to establish some measure of power and strength and dominance, reclaim some territory. But anything else you notice jump out in those verses? Something in verse 25 that ought to stand out. Who does it mention? Jonah. We have an entire book, though it's a short book, but we have an entire book of Jonah. And Jonah stands out because he comes up in the New Testament. A very important point about Jesus Christ said, you'll not see this any sign except the sign of the prophet Jonah. And so there's a lot going on with Jonah there. But remember, it says that he's from Gath-Hepher, which is up there in that territory of Israel. It's in the region of Galilee. It's just west of the Sea of Galilee. He was told to go where? To Nineveh. All right, where's Nineveh? What is Nineveh?
Capital of Assyria.
Capital of Assyria, way up there to the northeast on the river Tigris. But he ends up going to Joppa. Remember that? Of course, he goes out, gets swallowed by the fish, he gets spit out, and he ends up finally going to Nineveh. Why did Jonah not want to go to Nineveh?
He hated those people.
Why did he hate those people? Anybody?
They were known for their barbarous acts. They were idolatrous. They were, essentially in Israel's eyes, despicable people because of what they would do when they conquered someone.
Yes. And Mike?
And oddly enough, we read about some of the atrocities happening in Israel that, are just as bad as what's going on.
Right. Well, Jonah is what we would say he was a patriot, he was a nationalist, as well as being a believer in Jehovah God. And he could see that Assyria was a serious threat. They were a growing power, pushing their influence and control down this way. He knew it was a problem. He didn't want Nineveh to be spared. He wanted God to destroy them. That's what you go through in the book of Jonah. But it also tells us very interestingly that you have this cruel power that's here, as Clint was saying. They were known for just vicious acts. They would skin people alive. They would cut out their tongues and cut off their noses, things like that. They would mound up piles of skulls at city gates to intimidate everyone. Hey, if you resist us, here's what's coming to you. And so they were absolutely brutal. And God, though, was still dealing with them. God was sending a message, sending a prophet to them. And we know from the book of Jonah, they heeded that message and they repented from the king down. They showed remorse, and so they were spared for a time. But this is all in that time frame. Jeroboam II, Jonah, Assyria rising as a power. God still working with them, trying to get them to straighten up and do right. So it's a very interesting time period in the history of Israel. Amos. Let's jump over to the prophet Amos because he is around during this time. And what we read about in his book, Amos chapters 1 and 2 in particular, where we're going to note here, that he pronounces judgment against Israel. So let's read Amos 1 verses 1 and 2. Amos 1, 1 and 2. Who will grab that for us? Go ahead, John.
The words of Amos, who is among the shepherds of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, the king of Judah, in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. And he said, The Lord roars from Zion, and utters his voice from Jerusalem. The pastors and the shepherds mourn, and the top of Mount Carmel withers.
Okay, so this declaration from God during this time period of these kings, including Jeroboam, of course. Now, when you read through Amos, you see in chapter 1, verses 3 through 10, he deals with these distant nations that are unrelated to Israel. He's got Damascus and Gaza and Tyre and so on, so he's dealing with them. But then verse 11 beginning, he deals with Edom. And what relation was Edom and also Ammon in verse 13 and following? What relation do they have to Israel?
Just cousins.
Yeah, if you trace them back far enough, you either go through Abraham or you go through Lot to get these relationships that they have there. And so that's a little bit closer. So he's targeting this wide area, if you will, and then he brings it in a little bit closer with Edom, Ammon, and Moab at the beginning of chapter 2 there. And then chapter 2, verses 4 and 5, he pronounces judgment against Judah. And then in verse 6 of chapter 2, he talks about the transgressions of Israel. And the transgression, here's the thing about it, as he's talking about these foreign nations, as he's talking about the distant relations, as he's talking about Judah, and this message is going to Israel, they're probably saying, hey, that's great. Condemn them. They're wrong. They're bad. But then he zeroes in on Israel and hits them for their sins. And let's notice in particular Amos 2. Let's read verses 6 through 8 here. 6 through 8. Who's got that for us? Go ahead, Tom.
Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Israel, for 4, I will not revoke the punishment, because they sell the righteous for silver, and the needy for a pair of sandals. Those who trample the head of the poor into the dust of the earth, turn aside the way of the afflicted. A man and his father going to the same girl, so that thy holy name is profaned. They lay themselves down beside every altar on garments taken in pledge, and in the house of their God they drink the wine of those who have been fined.
Okay. So this greediness, this perversion, they are corrupt even though they're wealthy, they're prosperous. In chapter 4, Amos chapter 4, verse 1, who will read that for us? Go ahead, Charles.
Hear this word, you cow of nation, who are on the mountain of Samaria, who oppress the poor, who crush the needy, who say to your husband, bring wine, let us drink.
Okay, so who's he addressing? Chapter 4, verse 1.
Sounds like wives.
How does he describe them? Cows. Okay, that's some insulting language. That here you are, you're acting like a bunch of fat cows laying around and calling your husbands to bring the wine. You oppress the poor, you crush the needy, you just run over and trample the rights. You have no compassion for your fellow Israelites. And so he's going after them, attacking them for this very selfish, worldly, carnal, materialistic type of attitude and behavior. So Amos attacks them and judges them in the name of the Lord to tell them these things are coming to an end. God is not going to tolerate this continuing on. So any other thoughts there before we jump back to 2 Kings? 2 Kings 15. In 2 Kings chapter 15, there's just this whole series of assassinations that take place. And we're not going to take time to read through all of this, but just notice here, 2 Kings chapter 15, and it says in verse 8, in the 38th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Zechariah, the son of Jeroboam, so that's Jeroboam the second, his son Zechariah, reigned over Israel and Samaria for how long?
6 months.
6 months. Jump down to chapter 15, verse 13. Shallum, the son of Jabesh, became king in the 39th year of Uzziah, king of Judah, and he reigned how long? 1 month. Now, the reason that Zechariah reigned 6 months is because, back up in verse 10, Shallum, the son of Jabesh, conspired against him and struck him, killed him in front of the people, and he reigned in his place. And then in verse 14, Menahem, the son of Gadai, went up from Tirzah, came to Samaria, and struck Shallum, the son of Jabesh, in Samaria, and killed him, and reigned in his place. So 6 months plus 1 month, 7 months. 7 months, you've got Jeroboam on the throne, and then you've got his son Zechariah, and then you have the Shallum, then you have Menahem. So within a year, you have 4 different rulers. You have this regime change one after the other. Let me ask you, what kind of country, or how would you feel living in a country where that type of change is taking place? What if we had 4 presidents in the span of 12 months? What would that do for our nation and our relations to other nations, our standing in the world? What would that do? Chaos?
They run better, I don't know. They run better what we have.
Well,
There would be a lot of confusion.
yeah, there's uncertainty and stability. One of the worst things is you can have somebody who's not a good ruler, but they're consistent. You know where they are, you know what they believe, you know what they do, you kind of have a good idea how they're going to react to things. At least you've got some consistency and relative stability. When you have one ruler, then another, and especially when you're talking about these guys willing to assassinate each other to take power, you've got uncertainty, instability, chaos, all kinds of things that just are not going right. John, do you have something?
Well, that's what brings a nation to its knees, and that's what causes the nation to fall, and that's what's going to happen here in the next couple of chapters.
Right.
This is a sign that things are coming to an end.
Yes, exactly right. This shows that spiral downward in this, in the nation, the power, the strength of that nation, because these types of things are taking place. This does not take place in an environment where a nation is unified, where people are acting in the best interests of the nation, where their hearts and minds are devoted to God. That doesn't happen in those situations. Ron?
Well, as we have experienced in more recent times, the United States and others that have removed heads of terrorism have done for the very thing that you're talking about, is to create instability so that you can bring about control over those areas.
Yes. This is most definitely something that has repeated itself in history, where one nation takes out the leader of another nation, and as we're going to see, particularly with Babylon, when they have the power, they'll put their own guy in from that nation in power, so they run and control the show there. So, yeah, exactly right. Very good point on that. So you've got all this instability taking place within the land there, and then you've got this Menahem, and he was one who wanted to make deals with Assyria, and he needed to. So chapter 15, let's read verses 17 to 20, please. Who will get that for us? 17 to 20. Clint?
In the 39th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Menahem, the son of Gadai, began to reign over Israel, and he reigned 10 years in Samaria. And he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart all his days from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which made Israel to sin. Pul, the king of Assyria, came against the land, and Menahem gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver, that he might help him to confirm his hold on the royal power. Menahem exacted the money from Israel, that is, from all the wealthy men, 50 shekels of silver from every man, to give to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria turned back and did not stay there in the land.
All right. So he's essentially paying him off, paying tributes, really a bribe. Hey, don't bother us. I'll just give you this bunch of money. Anybody have a guess? And I ran the calculations. I hope I got the right information on it. But anybody have a guess how much he paid him? Like if you put it into terms we understand better. 1,000 talents of silver, that's a lot, but... All right, so depending on the weight of a talent and what would have been used at the time, somewhere between 66 and 75,000 pounds in a talent, or 1,000 in 1,000 talents, that is, so 66 to 75 pounds per talent. So if you translate all that out to today's silver prices, you have somewhere between $37 to $43 million or so that he's paying off this guy to say, leave us alone. Some others have different higher prices associated with that. But he's paying him a good chunk of money to just leave and go away. There is Assyrian aggression at this time. And under question number 2 on 45 in the book, by the way, who was the king of the empire above who first attacked Israel and forced them to pay tribute? Who's the king of Assyria at this time? Okay, Tiglath-Pileser or Pileser, I think some say. He's also known as Pul, P-U-L. So both those names will appear. Just understand those two are interchangeable. Let's read 2 Kings 15, 27 to 30, And notice some of this aggression that's taking place here. Who's got that for us? Jim, go ahead.
In the 52nd year of Azariah, king of Judah, Pekah, the king, son of Remaliah, became king over Israel and Samaria, and reigned 20 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, the sons of David, who had made Israel sin. In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Syria, came and took Ijon, Abel, Beth-Makkah, Jeroah, Kedesh, Hazor, Gilead, and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and he carried them captive to Syria. Then Hoshea, the son of Elah, led a conspiracy against Pekah, the son of Remaliah, and struck and killed him. So he reigned in his place in the 20th year of Jehu, the son of Uzziah.
All right. So you have Pekah here who's rebelling against Assyria, Assyrian control, Assyrian mastery, and he pays for it because they come in and they conquer and they capture various cities and villages and areas in Israel, and it's mostly up in that northern area. Waldron makes mention of the fact that he captured Megiddo at this time, and that Megiddo was turned into the regional capital. And Isaiah makes reference to Galilee of the Gentiles, because this is that region of Galilee up in the northern part of Israel. And so that's that reference to that Galilee of the Gentiles, because they come in and they take over the place and control that territory. And so he's coming in and doing that, taking these places. Waldron also makes mention that Hazor, at this time, that archaeologists have found 3 foot of blackened ash in the region of Hazor. So they came in and they basically was scorched earth. They would come in and they would just wipe a city out, just completely raze it, burn it, take it to the ground. And so there's some confirmation of the archaeological record there. But what else did he do? What does it mention there that Assyria does at this time, particularly in verse 29 at the end? Okay, so this is before what we consider to be the Assyrian captivity, like the end of Israel. So prior to that time, there were people who were carried away captive. And this is believed to be around the 732. This is under Pekah, who's there. He gets assassinated, as we read before, but he is ruling and reigning. When he rebels, Assyria asserts its power, destroys those cities, takes control of a certain amount of territory, and they carry some people away captive into the broader Assyrian Empire, which stretches, as you can see there, all the way over to the Mesopotamian Valley into Persia, or what we know as modern Iran. So they had a pretty big territory at this time. But so there, then, because of this Assyrian aggression into the area, that Pekah, in reason of Syria, they join forces. They try to force Ahaz to join him. 2 Kings chapter 16 and verse 5. 2 Kings 16 verse 5. Who will read that for us? Go ahead, Ron.
Then reason the king of Syria and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, came up to Jerusalem to make war, and they besieged Ahaz, but could not overcome him.
Okay. Why are they besieging Ahaz? What's going on there? They want him to join in alliance, and so they're attacking him. He reaches out to the king of Syria. Ahaz bribed Tiglath-Pileser, verses 7 through 9. And in verse 2 Chronicles, let's go to 2 Chronicles 28. We want to see what happens here. 2 Chronicles 28, and let's read verses 17 to 21. 2 Chronicles 28, 17 to 21. Who's got that for us? Mike?
Where again the Edomites had come and attacked Judah and carried away captives. The Philistines also had invaded the cities of the lowland of the Negev of Judah and had taken Beth Shemesh, Ajalon, Gedera, and Soka with its villages, Timna with its villages, and Gilgal with its villages, and they settled there. For the Lord humbled Judah because of Ahaz, king of Israel, for he had brought about a lack of restraint in Judah and was very unfaithful to the Lord. So Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came against him and afflicted him instead of strengthening him. Although Ahaz took a portion out of the house of the Lord and out of the palace of the king and of the princes, and gave it to the king of Assyria, it did not help him.
Okay, so there's very limited what he did, and really ultimately, as the writer here says, he didn't help him. Where did he get the treasures, or where did he get the money to pay him? So
Well, it's from the house of the Lord, so from the temple.
Okay.
And he also took it out of his own house and out of all the prince's house and basically stripped everything of value out of Israel and sent it to him. So, out of the Judah, so there's getting to be nothing left.
Right. And when you go back through history, during times of prosperity and wealth, basically they would decorate their temples, their religious institutions, public buildings, and things like that with gold and precious stones. And they would put all that stuff up there, and it essentially served as a national treasury. And so in times of distress and in times when they needed money, they needed capital, they would go and strip those things off. And so this is actually a common practice in ancient times. But we need money. Where do we get it? Oh, it's on the walls. Let's strip it down and send it off. But he did it really for nothing here. So he turns to Assyria. So this is Ahaz, king of Judah, the southern kingdom, because you can see here Assyria up to the northwest, Syria, and then Israel, the northern kingdom. They're in the path. Both of them are in the path of Assyria as it's pushing down to Egypt there. And so they make this alliance to go against Assyria. Ahaz is trying to make an alliance with Assyria, the southern kingdom, and he wants protection, but it doesn't work for him. What would have worked for him? What should he have done instead of turning to
Turn back to God.
Turn to God. Yeah. You can just see these guys making one mistake after another, trying to depend upon the powers of men, and especially these foreign pagan powers, trying to depend on them, and it just didn't work. And it doesn't work. And great lesson to keep in mind. But they attack again, Ahaz. Then you have the fall of Israel under Hoshea. So let's turn back to 2 Kings 17. 2 Kings chapter 17. And we'll pick out a few things in here as Hoshea is that last king. Let's read verses 3 and 4 to start with. 3 and 4. Who's got that for us? 2 Kings 17, 3 and 4. Go ahead, Clint.
Against him came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and Hoshea became his vassal and paid him tribute. But the king of Assyria found treachery in Hoshea, for he had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt, and offered no tribute to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison.
Okay. All right, so he's turning to Egypt for help at this time. He's a vassal to Shalmaneser. This is another, of course, Assyrian ruler. And he thinks, well, I'll turn to Egypt. Again, making a mistake, just like Ahaz in Judah had made a mistake. In Israel, he's making the mistake of turning to political power down in Egypt to try to get them to help him out. And so he's in very real trouble here as Assyria continues to push its dominance. And one of the things you see with these, and we're going to see it with the southern kingdom, that as this foreign power exercises control, that for a while they'll cooperate, but then they rebel against that control, and the foreign power comes down harder, and maybe they rebel a little more, and then they get to the point where they're like, we're done with this. We're not messing with you anymore, and they completely wipe them out. And that's what's happening essentially with Hoshea here. So 2 Kings chapter 17, let's do a little more reading here. Well, first of all, just verse 5. Verse 5. Who's got that for us? Go ahead, Carter.
Now the king of Assyria went throughout all the land and went up to Samaria and besieged it for 3 years.
Okay, so besieged it for 3 years. Any thoughts about what's happening there over that 3-year period? Doesn't give us a lot of detail here, but...
I'd say inside of that, there would be a lot of desperation, chaos, a lot of turning on each other, and doing what you couldn't survive.
Paul?
That was enough time to starve some of them out.
Yes, there would most definitely be people starving to death in Samaria here. So one of the things you see in this is all of this is at God's hand. He's removed his protection from the northern kingdom because of all those sins, and we'll read more about those in a little bit, but he's removed that, and he's let this foreign power come in that is extremely cruel and brutal, and they lay siege, and the people in there are suffering and they are starving, and very often we read about it in the Old Testament, it turns to cannibalism, even to the point where they would be willing to eat their own children, things like that. And so you think about, that's the kind of thing that's happening here. That's the wrath that God is willing to express against his people who turn away from him and turn against him. And so it should have been, and we're going to, Lord willing, study about this next week, should have been Judah sitting there watching that going, oh, maybe we should change our ways here. But, Mike?
And really what happened is God just kind of stepped back and said, okay, to your own devices.
Yes.
And, you know, and the world is chaos. The world is evil. And these are the results of those things.
Right. John?
So you put this in the context of Jonah and what Jonah was sent out to do and the reservations that Jonah had and why he didn't want to go there. Well, he was supposed to go there anyway. So a lot of times the things that God asks us to do don't make sense to us because we can look back and say, well, Jonah was right. Look what happened. Well, not in God's eyes, because God was using Assyria to bring, these nations and bring them to an end. But Jonah was to go there anyway and to preach to them and serve God's purpose, whatever that may have been at that time.
Okay, so let's bring it into modern times. What about China? What about Russia? What about Iran? We sit here, we fret, we worry. They're our enemies, they're brutal, they're terrible, they're communists, they're this, they're that, they're the other. Who knows what God may be doing, working, using them to humble us, to get us to realize we need God. Nancy?
Yeah, I was just thinking when you're naming all of those countries, the enemy is with them here.
Mm-hmm.
It's not them. It's with them.
Yeah. And you look at both Israel and Judah, the problem was not external. It was always internal. Always. Because you look at the times that you have David in particular, Solomon, you look at, and I don't want to get ahead, I'll leave him off, Hezekiah, but you look at when they had righteous leaders and righteousness as a whole, the enemies weren't a problem. They didn't have an issue with that. So, good point on that. Let's read verses 7 through 23. This again is a big summary. And I'm going to back up to verse 6 in just a minute, but let's read 7 to 23 to understand what's behind what's going on here. So 7 to 23, who's got that longer reading? John?
This is chapter 17.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
And this occurred because the people of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, who brought them up out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and had feared other gods, and walked in the customs of nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel, and in the customs of the kings of Israel had practiced. And the people of Israel did secretly against the Lord their God things that were not right. They built for themselves high places in all their towns, from watchtower to fortified city. They set up for themselves pillars and Asherim on every high hill and under every green tree. And there they made offerings on all the high places of the nations did, whom the Lord carried away before them. And they did wicked things, provoking the Lord to anger. They served idols, of which the Lord had said to them, "You shall not do this." Yet the Lord warned Israel and Judah by every prophet, every seer, saying, "Turn from your evil ways and keep my commandments, my statutes, in accordance with all the law that I commanded your fathers, and that I sent to you by my servants the prophets." But they would not listen, but were stubborn as their fathers had been, who did not believe in the Lord their God. They despised his statutes and his covenants that he made with their fathers, and the warnings that he gave them. They went after false idols and became false. They followed the nations that were around them, concerning whom the Lord had commanded them that they should not do like them. And they abandoned all the commandments of the Lord their God, and made for themselves metal images of 2 calves. And they made an Asherah, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served Baal. And they burned their sons and their daughters as offerings, and used divination and omens, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. Therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel, and removed them out of his sight. None was left, but only the tribe of Judah only. Judah also did not keep the commandments of the Lord their God, but walked in the customs that Israel had introduced. And the Lord rejected all the descendants of Israel and afflicted them, and gave them into the hand of the plunderers until he had cast them out of his sight. When he had torn Israel from the house of David, they made Jeroboam the king of Nebat king. And Jeroboam drove Israel from following the Lord, and made them commit great sin. Through what
23.
The people of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam did. They did not depart from them, until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he had spoken by all his servants the prophets. So Israel was exiled from their own land to Assyria until this day.
Okay, so a couple of things to observe here. He makes the point, look, all this took place because they sinned. They did worse than the nations who were there before them. That God brought Israel in to cleanse out that sin and to establish his people in righteousness, to be devoted to him, worship him. But they did worse. And some of those worst things that he talks there about, they're sacrificing their children. And in Psalm 106, when we read before, it talked about shedding that innocent blood and sacrificing their children. Doing these images of Asherah and all that, all types of licentious type of worship that they were involved in. And so he brought them to an end. And you think about our nation. Europeans came over to this continent and wiped out pagan idolaters. It's just, we replaced them. We displaced them. Well, look at where we are now. I mean, would you say the morals of our nation generally are better than the morals of the natives who were here before we got here? Do we see that we commit abominations in the sight of God that match or exceed things that they were involved in? You take this to heart, like, we need to be turning to God. And I do think in our nation now there are people who are righteous I mean, we've got this congregation, many other congregations. There are people who have a somewhat respect for the morals of the Bible. And so it's that element that's here that helps to preserve this nation, but how long is that going to hold out? We need to be laboring hard to advance that truth, that righteousness, and help people to see the utter danger and despair that's ahead if we're not respectful of God. But verse 6, back up in 17, verse 6. Let's read that. Who will get that for us? 17, verse 6. Go ahead, Carter.
In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away to Assyria and placed them in Halah and by the Haber, the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes.
Okay. So carrying them away captive. So you see the purple area and then the broader gray area, the Assyrian Empire that's growing over time. So they transport them. So just look there where Samaria is, north of Jerusalem. They transport them from that general area to the furthest north place. So just east of Haran there is Gozan, and the Habor River runs in that area. North and south, essentially. And then further east, see Media and the cities of the Medes. So essentially, what do they do? I'm going to jump forward here. So they transport them to that far eastern area. What's going on here with Assyria? Why do they do that? Mike?
Well, when you remove somebody from their culture, put them into a completely different culture, there's no room for rebellion. You're just trying to make it through the day. You know, I think there's a lot of wisdom to that, I guess.
Oh, okay. And in verse 6 there in particular, it talks about they're in Halal, they're by the Habor, the river goes on, they're cities, multiple of the Medes. So it's not like they're putting them in a group. They're scattering them out. What this is doing is weakening them as a people to be able to organize and communicate, getting them into a different culture away from their homeland. And so destroying them politically and as a people, as a culture. And so they're scattered far and wide, as the Lord has said through His prophets and have warned them through Moses, particularly in the book of Deuteronomy. This is what's going to happen if you turn away from the Lord. And so it has come down upon them. When did the northern kingdom begin? About what year? Does anybody know? So it's after Solomon, Rehoboam comes to the throne. What's that time period roughly? Now, David reigned around 1000, and so Solomon probably around 960, and then maybe around 920 or so. So this is roughly, since this is around 722 BC, 721, this is about 200 years after that northern Israel became its own independent nation. So they lasted that long, but then the Lord brings them to an end here. And by the way, does anybody know what the Mormons teach about this? They say some of these lost tribes is who was over here when, Europeans came over, which if you just check genetics, it's not. Go ahead.
An interesting thing is they have, I can't remember what they call them, but they have drawings of, I think it's maybe like Jehu bowing down to the Assyrian kings and Assyrian princes, and it's labeled as such. But these happenings right now are documented in secular history very plainly.
Yes, there is a lot of confirmation in secular history of all these things. Very good. All right, Lord willing, we'll look at fall of Judah next week.